Every time you show up to hard training when you didn't want to, you build a record. You build a record. Your nervous system believes that record when the real situation arrives. The man who has never been pushed past the point where his body says stop is operating in unknown waters. And unknowns in a crisis are where people get hurt.
Samurai with that look in his eye, walking through a wasteland, sword swinging peaceful at his side. After bringing the type of...
The American church has a man problem, not a theology problem, a formation problem. Most men sit in a pew every week, been educated about faith. They have not actually been built by it, and there is a difference, one that surfaces the moment something genuinely hard arrives. In more than 60 nations right now, men are being imprisoned, beaten, and killed for following Jesus. The question I want to ask today is not whether you know that. The question is whether the man being produced by your church, by your formation environment, would hold under that weight or fold. This is Martial Matters. Follow and subscribe. The discipleship pipeline most American churches are running. A man sits in a seat, hears a sermon, and participates in a group where nobody says anything too costly, and is told that he's growing. He has accumulated information. He's never been tested. He does not know who he is under pressure because nobody has ever put him there. That model produces men who are kind, well-meaning, and fundamentally brittle because they've never been put under a load. And the situations that are already arriving for believers in hard places, for church communities facing security threats, for men called to serve in volatile regions, do not care how many sermons a man has sat through. Pressure reveals the man who freezes did not suddenly become someone else. No, he found out who he already was. The man who holds drew from something built long ago before the moment arrived. Not in a comfortable group setting, but in training, in hardship, in the kind of honest community the church consistently fails to build. Daniel resolved before Nebuchadnezzar's table was in front of him. Before the pressure was real, his identity was settled, so when the moment arrived, there was no decision to make. The church's job is to produce men like Daniel. Most churches are not doing that. Daniel 1:8 says, "But Daniel resolved not to defile himself." Built before the test, settled before the storm. That is the only identity that holds. I want to tell you a story about a guy named Mike. And this comes from the time when I was doing security on the east side of Kansas City in around 2011, 2012, when it was frequently one of the most violent neighborhoods in the U.S. And everything you can imagine went down in that neighborhood, from murders to drugs to miscellaneous kinds of violence to robberies to etc., you name it. And I was doing security for a ministry that would run a food pantry for the neighborhood and would also run 2 free meals every week for the neighborhood as well, or 2 dinners, Monday and Fridays. And Mike was one of those really nice guys who had a heart for the community, wanted to come up there and come and serve with everything he's got. He worked in the kitchen. And it was the dining hall where most of these things always happened, if they happened inside the building, where somebody from the neighborhood didn't like the other person, and you know what happens after that. So I had to jump into a situation while Mike was in the kitchen one of these days, and this happened very frequently, where I had to de-escalate a situation kinetically, so to speak. And Mike didn't think that the way that I handled it was very Christ-like. He thought that I might have used excessive force, and he thought that there might have been another way. And he told me, he was just like, you know what? I think that you could probably just do this job just by praying for people. And I was like, okay, Mike, how about you try that next time? I'll stand back and let you try it next time, because this stuff happened all the time. Like I said, about a week or 2 later, Mike was in the kitchen. Something like this happened again in his eyesight. And I stood back and I let Mike go and test his theory. Mike almost got beat up. And he did take some shots, but I had to jump in there and I pulled Mike out of there. And this is the point of what I'm saying. Mike didn't have a proper understanding of violence of action, of force when necessary. He didn't have a proper theology of gentleness. Gentleness is strength under control. It's power knowing when it's supposed to be deployed. And this story isn't about disparaging Mike. It's about showing a deeper problem. It's about showing the mentality that the church on the majority is creating in most of the men who attend it. Which is why most men don't really like going to church. The church can teach conviction. It just cannot produce capability without stress. And the formation environment most churches offer is designed to minimize stress, not build the man through it. Stress inoculation, elevated heart rate before a decision drill, physical exhaustion before a technical task, live resistance from a partner who actually fights back. This is not extreme training. It is basic preparation. It is the work the church skips because it's uncomfortable and because it does not produce the metrics a Sunday morning attendance count measures. Every time you show up to hard training when you didn't want to, you build a record. You build a record. Your nervous system believes that record when the real situation arrives. The man who has never been pushed past the point where his body says stop is operating in unknown waters. And unknowns in a crisis are where people get hurt. They're where people get killed. They're where the worst things happen. This channel exists because someone has to build that environment for men who are called to go somewhere hard. The church has largely declined due to it. So we do it here and in the field. And the results are not theoretical. Proverbs 25 says, "The purposes of a person's heart are deep waters, but one who has insight draws them out." Training draws out what is actually there. Not what you wish was there, but what is. Everything I've said about the formation failure of the church comes down to one question. Whose are you? Not what you've accomplished, not what you think you can do. When the pressure hits and every constructed layer gets stripped away, whose are you? The men I have watched hold their ground in genuinely dangerous situations were not the strongest or the most experienced in the room always. They were the most anchored. They had a settled answer to the question before the situation demanded it. That settledness is not produced by information solely. It is produced by testing, in the Word, in training, in honest to God brotherhood community, in the kind of hard circumstances that the comfortable church systematically avoids. Isaiah 43:1 says, "Do not fear, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by name. You are mine." Not a comfort statement, not a comfort sentiment. That's a tactical statement. The man who knows this at the level of his nervous system does not spiral in a crisis. He was anchored before the storm hit. The church that builds men like this, anchored identity, tested character, clear sense of whose they are and why they're here, is building something that no hard day can undo. Most churches are not building that. So I want you to do 3 actions this week. First, write your honest answer to this too. Who am I when the situation stops being manageable? Not aspirational. Be honest with yourself. The gap between that answer and where you want to be is your training priority. Number 2, one real resistance element this week. A partner who fights back. A scenario that you cannot control the outcome of. Number 3, man, spend 10 minutes in Isaiah 43. Not rushing, but gleaning from it. Let the understanding wash over you. The church can build men like this. Most won't build the environment that does, though. But this channel does that. This channel seeks to fill the gap that the church has created in this generation. Martial matters.
Understand that at the moment you take a hold of the truth of it, you become an immovable juggernaut in the thick of it.